much, Delilah, for sharing and reading with us maybe a very well-known verse. How many of you have ever heard that verse before? Isn't it such a familiar verse? Isn't it one of those verses where you think like, oh no, not again that one. I've been privileged for a number of days to have been allowed to sit again and actually try to still the voices. Quiet the voices. Now, church, don't be scared. Don't be worried. Don't think like, oh, now we need to pray for a pastor because he's hearing voices. It's going down with him, rock bottom. Or maybe, church, please actually do pray. Do pray for me. Pray for each other. Pray for yourself to hear a voice. To hear the voice. The voice of all voices. The voice that makes sense. The voice that actually most of the time does not say a thing. But that voice that actually says, well, at least to me this last week, he said to me, Geert, sit. Sit. And shut up. Yeah, I put it like that. You see, God to me has sometimes become very, very strong. He tries it, nudging, pleading, asking. But eventually he has to come to me and just say, okay, that's enough, Geert. Stop your rambling on. Stop your talking and thinking. Just for a moment, stop it. Be quiet. And know, only know one thing, that I am your God. As I was thinking of that verse this week, had a number of times the opportunity to just go out, sit on the fields, the green fields of Newbold College, in this beautiful weather that we had this week again, sitting there and becoming quiet. This was one of the verses that I was asked to just sit and drink in. Drink it in. And as I was trying to do that, a picture came to my mind that I drew. A picture of a glass with fluid in it, a glass with water. But the glass was half filled. And isn't it true that we often look at a glass like that, and that way we look at life, and perhaps you look at God that way too. You look at that glass and you look at it and it's only filled to half of it. And you feel like it's only half full or it is half empty. The way that you look at it, half full, can indicate that you have quite a positive look at life. It is half full. It could have been empty, but hey, look at that. It's not empty. It's half full. We call that an optimist. Or are you the person, as honestly, I find myself a lot of times looking at the glass and saying, it's half empty. What happened to the rest? I didn't take it. What's going on here? Why did I not get a full glass? I deserve a full glass. It's the negative way of looking at things in life and perhaps God. Because we can look at God in a way like at that glass. And we can look at God and say like, what picture do I have of God? What picture do you have of God? Is your picture of God the one that was created in so many ways by the way maybe we were raised? The way that maybe you heard sermons preached? And God forbid, I hope I have not helped in that part, but that you see a God that is this stern, old man, white beard, sitting on a throne with a face, and basically like some of those gods that the Greeks and the Romans would have with this kind of lightning strikes in his hands and thunder in the other, and he's there to judge you, to tell you how empty you are. Is that the picture of God? Or is he the God that yes, he created everything beautiful, but actually you believe that, but it seems like when he was creating and he created all and said it's good, it's very good, and then human beings were said like, now take care of it, and that was it. Now take care of it. Bye, I will see you someday. The God who created but then just disappeared. Is that the God that you see? Or is he maybe the God that you feel like, oh, I need something, Lord, and you know what I need. You know my whole list of things I need. It's not just one thing. There's a lot of things that are not, I need. That God is almost like the perfect Father Christmas. Because he will give. Is that the God? Is he maybe the God that, looking at from maybe a more positive side, is he the God that you see running ahead while the lost son or the lost daughter is starting to come home? Something has happened within that person, and God cannot wait but runs towards the Father who runs. Is that the picture? Is the picture of a Father who hears us when we call, and somehow, somewhere we find this extra strength. We can't tell where it came from, but it happened. You see, that's what I believe makes faith something so special. But it depends so much on the way that you look at it. Jesus spoke beautiful words in Matthew 6. He said, seek you first the kingdom of God. Which God the Father he was thinking of. And search for his righteousness. In Luke 17, the kingdom of God is within you. Luke chapter 12, fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. I mean, here Jesus was constantly trying to paint a picture of a father who wants to give us all that we need. And in that to experience the kingdom, not eventually when we go to heaven, but to experience the kingdom right here on earth. Jesus was thinking much bigger. As one of the words for my kids earlier, infinity. That's what Jesus was thinking of. He was not thinking of the almost finite heaven, somewhere there where we eventually will go. No, infinity. Heaven is already here within you, happening. It talks about a mindset that taught me this week again that God is an active God and he wants to have an active relationship. Not just a mindset of God pictured out and that's what he is. No, a God that goes beyond that. A God who wants to be known, wants to be experienced, wants to be enjoyed. A holy, loving, personal, and righteous Father. Not to kept from a distance because out of fear, but to kept close as we could even imagine. And that's where that passage of Jeremiah then connects so well. And I know it is taken from a different perspective of the people being in deep trouble, the people of Israel. But in that same chapter, God's still showing his love, his covenant that he had with them. For I know the plans I have for you, people of Israel. I know the plans I have for you, people of Stanborough Park. The plans I have for you, everyone who came and everyone who's connected today. The plans I have for you. And then he says, I declare that. I declare that. It's not just something, let me just mention something. That might be nice to know. No, Jesus said, I declare it. Declaring is not just an empty word. That is almost like that contract. I declare it. That's my bond with you. You and me. We're in it together. And that's why I've called it a declaration of interdependency. And I know that some of you will be thinking like, oh, but God is not dependent on me. Well, I would love to sometimes talk about that. Because the Bible also speaks in some terms where God said that He created us so that we could worship Him. There seems to be a correlate. There seems to be something that is beyond us. It's not something that needs to be earned, but it's something that God is looking for, that we're in it together. Not me doing it to Him or Him doing it to me, but something that is relating. Interdependency. The covenant God, actually in a few verses on, says, then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. And then the most beautiful words, I think, in that passage. And I will be found by you. Now, if that is not a declaration of dependency, I don't know what is. Then I will be found by you. I will make it happen, no matter where you are. You see, and as I was contemplating on that, I was reminded of something that happened right at the beginning of my ministry. I came fresh from Newbold College in those days. I was young and I had hair. And the pictures are there to prove it. There was hair. And when I look at those pictures, I think that's not me. I always looked as good like this. But apparently there was hair in those days. And as I was coming from Newbold, I was placed into small churches in the south of the Netherlands, in an area that was predominantly Roman Catholic. And many of the people that I met there, also Adventists, had a Roman Catholic background. And that brought beautiful challenges, I tell you. That was just amazing to be allowed to work there. And I remember one of those members one morning calling me, Pastor, I've got two friends. And let me call them Fred and John. Two friends, Fred and John, they would like to have a meeting with you. They're coming this Sabbath. Could you make an appointment with them? And I said, sure. I mean, this was not yet a mobile. They were not really there yet, unless you had these big blocks. But it was over the phone, the landline. And so that Sabbath I come to church, and there she was, this lady who had called me and said, here are my friends, Fred and John. And this lady is like this. She was a tiny Indonesian sister. And I looked at her, and then I looked at, hi, Fred and John. I mean, they were cupboards. Literally cupboards. And not just because of the height, but the whole body was covered. It was just solid. And I just come from Newbold, and I thought I looked fit, because to be able to still finish my last bit of studies there, I worked massively in the grounds with Peter Riley at that time, maybe a name familiar to some of you. And man, did he make you work. And we had to dig out the roots from trees. So that was hard work in the summer. But I came back fit, I tell you. And I thought, I was proud. I was proud. My wife at that time said, like, yeah, that looks good. That looks good. And then I saw these two guys standing in front of me and thought, I'm nothing. There's nothing. I mean, they were pumped. Because not only were they big, they were both into bodybuilding and in martial arts. So when I got to know them, I thought, whoa, maybe I can learn a thing or two from them. And they said, Pastor, thank you so much. Would you be willing to come and visit us? I said, so I got my diary out. There were no planners yet in an electronic way. You put your book out. And how about this week, Wednesday evening, 7 o'clock? Does it work for you? Sure, Pastor, we will wait. This is our address, so I put it down. That Wednesday, I'm driving there, 7 o'clock. I knock on the door, and the brothers open up. Massive guys again in the doorpost. They would have never fitted together side by side, hardly even just by themselves. But I walked into their house, and as I came into the living room, I could see that this was an interesting place. You know, living rooms often says a lot about the people. If you didn't know that, well, now you know. So I went into the living room, and I saw all these statues standing everywhere, and I saw posters on the walls. And although I had no clue what they really meant, I could tell they were not pictures of the 12 disciples. They were not pictures of Mother Mary, which I was used to by now. They were not pictures of all kind of things. These were pictures of all kind of gods. And they didn't look happy, these gods, I tell you. The posters were not happy either. And then between the two biggest posters hang this dagger. And not any kind of a dagger, it was a snake dagger. And I recognize it because as a child, although you will be saying like, what? Your parents let you watch that? Okay, that's a different story. But there was a children's series at that time on television that had an Indonesian sort of take to it. And I say Indonesian because it was happening on the islands, and it was about a dagger that had gone missing, and the dagger was called the Kris Pusaka. The Kris Pusaka, which was this dagger that looked like a snake. And it was a dagger that could be used to put spells on people. And so I look at the dagger, and I look at Fred and John and said, thank you so much for welcoming me in your house. And they said, Pastor, it's so nice that you're here with us and our family. And I said, oh, there are more people in the house. Your parents, brothers, sisters, just invite them to come down. No, Pastor, they're already here. It was not that big a living room. And I didn't need glasses then. So I had pretty much still a 20/20. I could see things clearly, but I knew there was no one else, not even pets. I said, tell me more. They said, right beside you are sitting some of our ancestors. I still remember that inside I was sort of chuckling like, yeah, right. I mean, I'm Dutch, come on. There's nothing there. They said, so don't be afraid, they're really there, but they will not harm you. I thought to myself, that's good to know. But I started to feel a little bit more uneasy. They will not harm you, Pastor, for we have the power over them. Now I start thinking, yeah, right. Right. Pastor, you've seen that dagger hanging there. That's a dagger that we use to put spells on people, and we can confess that it works. We've made people very sick to almost dying. We could do the same to you, but Pastor, we like you. Said, okay. And I was honest. I said, I have to be honest, I've never been in this situation before. And I remember at that time that I did what I call in the Netherlands a schietgebedje. Pang! A quick prayer. Just like, Lord, if I ever needed you now, it's now. Just sit between them, around me. We talked for that evening, and by the time they said to me, Pastor, I think it's time that we put an end to it tonight, and we maybe make another appointment, it was 11:30. Time had flown. But I remember getting into my car, and I put in a CD. A CD that played, I have decided, gonna live like a believer, turn my heart from the deceiver. Amy Grant. I played it so loud because I had to drive for an hour in pitch dark with no one else on the motorway, and I did not feel alone in my car. And I'm not talking about the right spirit. I was scared, people. But I left the house with the last words of the brothers, John and Fred, saying to me, Pastor, we think that for us there will never be a way to get to your God, because we've done so many things wrong. He will not accept us. I left them with this verse from 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, where it says these beautiful words. Anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone. The new life has begun. I left that. And looking back, I know that relationship with those two brothers had an impact on me personally my ministry. But there has also been other people that had an impact on my life. One of them you would find on the ground in the mud. And that person is desperate and he's afraid. And the other person is also on the ground, but he's covered in dust. And he too is desperate and afraid. And both of these men have arrived at the lowest point in their lives. They have really, literally hit rock bottom. Now, have you ever, when you think about it, have you ever hit rock bottom in your life? Have you ever come to that place where you just feel like, I can't go any lower in my life, any deeper? The pain, the trouble, the despair, the anger, whatever it is so deep, I will never get out of this. But that's the saying goes. When you hit rock bottom, when you hit that bottom place, the only way to look is what? Up. And these two men, rock bottom, they look up into the sky, thinking about their next move. But for a moment, we have to rewind the story, because you see, when we go back in time, we actually discover that both of these two men were very religious. They were not people from outside or had no clue about God. Man, they were godly. They both had been raised in a Christian home, went to religious schools, ended both up in the ministry. People looked up to them, respected them, had even high expectations of both of them. And so the question is actually very simple then. How did these two men, so religious, so highly respected, ended up in that situation, rock bottom, the lowest point of their lives? What did happen? And as the question is simple, the answer is likewise. All of their religion had left them empty. Let me say that again. All their religion had left them empty. Again, question to me, to you. Has religion ever left you empty? Disillusionment. Thought that religion would give you something, but it never really worked out. That it wasn't what you expected it to be. Because I believe that there is one place where we should be able to come openly and confess. Confess about the emptiness that we find, I find, and possibly you too, in our search. If there's only a place for that, this must be the place, right here. This place, this community, people that confess with one another that we are followers of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Because here we don't have to pretend. Here we don't have to be fake. I like to believe that we are here because you and I recognize that there is something that we need to find out. Find out something that we have not yet been able to find. Definitely did not find it out there. So it must be happening here, Lord. Something that you and I are searching for. Something that our hearts are crying for. Nothing that out there can satisfy, can fill. I believe that all of us, as we are here in this room, some way or another, we are broken. There is something broken. And so maybe, instead of coming to each other in the morning, say, Happy Sabbath, good to see you. Maybe we should come together and say like, hey, my name is Geert. I'm empty. And then you all would say like, hi, Geert. As we do in some of these meetings, to really be honest and say who we are, where we are. But no, we come, Happy Sabbath. How are you doing, brother? Life is great, man. God is so good, isn't He? And don't get me wrong, of course we can say that at times. But I will confess here, right here, that I will have said it to you a number of times in the 4 years that I've been here with you, where I said it, and inside, man, it was not a happy Sabbath. Just wasn't. But hey, that's what we do here, right? We pretend. We just, no, we can't just say like, what if we were to say to each other, have you got some time? Shall we go for a walk? Well, hey, service starts in a few minutes. I need to get my spot, and I love some of the songs, and I need to do this and that. But probably you and I might have had recently some sleepless nights because of the noise in our heads. This should be the place where we could come and have a conversation, a real, authentic relationship. Here we are allowed to come empty. The most beautiful thing is we don't have to come here and pretend. Make other people believe that we've all figured it out. Because we come here to worship a God, He has all figured it out. And so these two men were empty, but they did not want to show it. And so one of them would preach his sermon that Sabbath, and then afterwards go back to his house, to his room, and pray like this: God, what is wrong with me? I told them that they can trust you, that you will take care of them. But Lord, I myself feel so empty inside. He felt that his prayers were not going any further than the ceiling, if at the ceiling at all. But he carried on, like the other one. But then something awful started to happen. Because when the human heart is breaking, when it starts to run empty, eventually it finds a way to express what it's really feeling. I mean, you can hide your brokenness for only so long, but then it will start to spill out. It will happen in the way that maybe you respond to your children, or to your spouse, to your co-workers. Somehow it's going to spill out. Maybe it's on the motorway when someone cuts you off. Or maybe it's just in the supermarket where these people are in the wrong lane. This was for the baskets and not for the trolleys. You know, some of those moments where you just like, "Rrr." It will come out. And so one of these two men, in his desire to appease God, to deal with the emptiness, he decided that the solution was just to do even more, to become more committed, more strict, more zealous. And so he plunged himself even more into his work. And because of his work, he was even ready to hurt people, and hurting people he did. Many families, many places would tell you terrible stories that this man left behind, all because he wanted to do God a favor. And isn't it amazing how far sometimes people will go to please their God? Now the other man, he took a different route. He did not decide to become more serious, more zealous. No, he just decided, I'm quitting. That's it. God, I'm done with you. I'm done with the work. I'm done with the ministry. I've had it. I'm out. He was shattered, broken, lost. Because that's what religion will often do. It will either drive you to insanity or it will drive you to despair. But now something happened to both of these men. The first one, you can read the story for yourself in the book of Acts, chapter 9. His name at that moment is Saul. Saul is this very committed one, zealous, and when he finds himself empty, he goes even deeper. He becomes more zealous. And can you see him in that story? As the story says, he's sitting there on his horse on the way to what town? Damascus. And he's got a purpose. He's got a goal. And he sits there on the horse. And can you see him sitting there on the horse on the way to Damascus? Chin up, chest forward, nose in the air. I'm going to make it happen for you, Lord. I'm doing this for you. And as he's on his way, all of a sudden, he's thrown off his horse. And a voice speaks out. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Isn't that amazing? Isn't that Jesus all the way? Where he is not saying, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting those people? Now, why are you persecuting me? Very simply, in that statement, Jesus points out to you and me that he and his followers, they are together. They are bounded together. They have a covenant. They have a declaration of interdependency. To Jesus, they are not them, but they are us, we together. And what does Saul do? He looks up, blinded as he is, and he says, "Who are you, Lord? Who are you, Lord?" The other man was Alejandro, an Adventist pastor. And maybe you've heard his story. But he one day went to his conference leader, to the president, and he said, "I quit. I'm done. I never signed up for the ministry for the things that I have to go through. I'm done. I can't take it anymore." You see, he had been raised as an Adventist. He had gone through all the Adventist schools. And he would think like, man, if anyone can come through, that's him. But as he went through all these things, he got baptized. And there was a voice in his mind that said, "Now, Alejandro, now that you've been baptized, I want you to be even better, okay? Do even better." So that's what he did. He got better. And eventually he got to the schools. And then he was made a pastor. And again the voice came back to him and said, like, "Alejandro, now that you are a pastor, now you definitely have to get it right, okay? Now that you work for me, you definitely need to get it right. No mistakes. People will look up to you." And so he did his pastoral work. He spoke to people about how great God was and what they should do in their relationship with God. But the pastor himself was empty. He said the right words, but there was no connection. He didn't know God. And so he went to the conference leader and said, "I quit. I am done. I'm out." Thankfully, this conference leader was a person who had gotten to know Alejandro a bit. And he looked at him and said, like, "Okay, Alejandro, I hear what you're saying, but let's try one more thing. I'm gonna send you out." And he took Alejandro and he said, "Alejandro, I'm going to take you to the Amazon. I'm going to take you to the Amazon, and that's where you're going to work among the Indians. Many of them have never heard about Jesus. I'm going to send you there." And so Alejandro said to the president, "Okay." To God, he said a few more words. He said, "Okay, but this is your last chance. After that, I'm out. I've had it." And so he went to the Amazon, left his family, left everything behind, and he came there simply just with a few clothes and his Bible. He moved into the jungle of Peru to work there with the Indians, those who had not been reached. And it was on a Friday that he planned to go to one of the villages where he knew the chief who could speak English. And so he went to that on their way to the village, but he had learned that if you want to go to a village in the jungle, you better leave very early, because you don't want to get stuck in the jungle in the darkness. And especially later in the afternoon, bad weather always comes in. I've been there in Peru, and always in the end of the afternoon, the heavens break open and it gets dark and lightning and everything. Just because of the heat and the water and everything, it builds up. And it's so refreshing, but you don't want to be in the middle of the jungle in that kind of a weather, in the dark. And so Alejandro, that morning, very early in the morning, left to go to the village. And as he was going through the jungle, eventually, he started to feel this sense of, I think I've been here before. But he kept on walking. And he came back to a place, like, surely I've been here before. And very soon he started to realize that he had gotten lost. And so he went to the right, and later a little bit to the left, and he started running forth and back and up and down. But no matter what he tried, he found himself to be completely lost. And then he felt, the only thing I can do now is start running, because he could see how time was flying. 12 o'clock, he was still lost. 2 o'clock, he was still lost. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he was still lost, and he could see the clouds coming in. He could hear the rumbling. And he started running through the jungle. And as he was running, and the rain started to fall, he slipped. And as he slipped, he fell into a huge ditch. And he fell in such a way that his backpack flew away, and he hit all kind of branches, and he hurt himself, and he ended up on the bottom. He could only look up, but all he saw was darkness. He couldn't see a thing. He tried to climb out, but it was all mud now. And whatever Alejandro tried to do, he was not able to get out. And there he sat all the way on the bottom and saying, God, Here I am. That's what you wanted, right? Now, where are you now? Is this it? And he realized that the situation that he was in was exactly how he felt his life was. Right at the bottom pit, in the mud, done. It was exactly what his life was all about, how he would paint his own life, like that. He said, God, well, thank you, but no thank you. There was one thing that came to his mind. One thing that he remembered, that if you get lost in the jungle, and it's a tip for you for free. If you get lost in the jungle, start screaming. Yes, start screaming. I know we don't do that in church, but in the jungle you can. You can scream. I actually learned that from Bear Grylls. Sound familiar, that name? He does this kind of program now where you can choose what were you to do if you were in the jungle in this kind of situation. And then it gives you two options. And one of those options was, like, you're lost. What do you do? Do you just stay still or do you start screaming? And Melanie and myself were watching the program and we clicked on scream. I said, that makes most sense. And we had it right. Because Bear Grylls said so. He said, that's what you do. When you're in the middle of the jungle and you're lost, scream. Because there might be a chance. Okay, there might be no chance, but hey, better something than nothing. There might be a chance that someone else hears you scream, and they probably will scream back. And now you can start listening. Where's the scream coming from? And eventually you both will try to find each other, and now you've got help. And so that's what Alejandro did. He started screaming down in the ditch, screaming, until all of a sudden he heard a scream coming back at him. And he kept screaming. He himself couldn't go anywhere. He kept screaming, and the scream came closer in return. And eventually, as he wanted to scream one more time, he felt there was someone right beside him. And with a little bit of light that was just there by a flash coming down from heaven, he could see a face with all kind of colors on it, an Indian. An Indian right there with him in the ditch. And so Alejandro asked, who are you? Nothing was said. But the Indian just said, like, body language, let's go out. But who are you? No word. The Indian started to climb out and took Alejandro with him. Gotten out of the ditch, and now they started walking in the pitch dark through the jungle, where Alejandro himself, as the story says, he could not see a thing, but wondered how could the Indian see anything in this pitch dark. And so he asked him again, like, who are you? But nothing was said until eventually, what seems like an eternity to Alejandro, he saw some lights flickering through the bushes of the jungle. And they came into a village, and there came the chief from the same village that he had intended to visit. And the chief came out and said, like, Pastor, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? You know that you don't come at this time of night to us in the villages. I mean, how did you ever get through the jungle? How did you manage? But Alejandro, the story says, was so tired, so done, that he couldn't speak a word. And all he said, that he had to sleep. And so the chief put him into one of his huts, and Alejandro slept through the night. The next morning, he woke up, he walks out of his hut, and he wants to wash his face, and the chief is already standing there. And he tells him, what did you do, man? None of us as Indians would ever do such a thing, to travel through the jungle in the middle of the night. You know how dangerous that is? You could have been killed. How did you find our village? Well, chief, it was the Indian who found me, and he brought me to your village. And the chief started laughing. The chief started laughing. He said, yeah, come on, I know. It's actually it happens to quite some people. They get into this situation when you get to this stage where you're so tired, when you're so desperate and in such a trouble that you start seeing things. That's just what happened to you. You saw things, but it's not really there. It's just the mind that plays with us. No, Chief. I'm not making it up. I would have never been able to climb out of the ditch in which I got myself. It was the Indian that pulled me out of there, and he actually last night, he stood right beside me when we met. And the chief said, man, Pastor, you were alone. You were alone. And so Alejandro doesn't want to argue. All he now wants to do is wash his face. And so the chief points him behind the bushes. There's a creek where you can wash. And so Alejandro kneels down and starts to wash his face. And that's where he starts to talk to God. And for the first time, Alejandro starts to experience what it means when your prayer does not go to the ceiling and comes back. It would have never reached the ceiling because his prayer went straight an inch right beside him. He felt the moment he started speaking, God was right there. God was not at the ceiling, he was right there. And he felt that God had been there all his life. And he knew that God that night had come to him. His father had come down to him in the ditch, took his hand, led him to the village, never spoke a word. But his presence now was clear. And in that village, the story of Alejandro says, Alejandro was born again. Now here was this man in the dust, blinded by the light, wrapped up in maybe anger, confusion, in bewilderment, despair, calling out, Lord, who are you? He couldn't see, was led into Damascus, and there also became born again. Two men divided by about 2,000 years, one from Israel, one from Peru, both coming to the realization that religion is not the same. Religion is not the same. And one more time, religion is not the same as relationship. Fred and John, back to the Netherlands, experienced that too. I was allowed to come back week after week, and every week I came, I remember more and more of the statues were gone. Eventually, the dagger was gone. And they said, Pastor, you're sitting alone now at the table with us, just the two of us. I felt a lot better, I tell you. Not because I felt like, man, I made it happen. No, oh no. No, I would not feel anything like that. I just felt like, whew, this was the real thing. Eventually, both Fred and John, as I call them now, they said, we want to be baptized. We want to follow Jesus. And I tell you, that Sabbath in our little church of 60 members and a small baptism pond, that was funny, because that was my first baptism. I practiced with Miranda in the swimming pool, but Miranda is not a bodybuilder. No, and she is not huge as a cupboard. No, she was nice and petite, and it just went really well in the swimming pool. But in that baptism pool, it was not like, wow, he knows what he's doing. I mean, I knew how to bring a person down. And I had been told by pastors, other pastors, be mindful that when you bring them down, they also have to come up. They want to come up. They really do. And I brought Fred down, and as he went down, and I thought, like, okay, now I'm going to bring him up. Man, he was indeed that cupboard, and now filled with water too. Not just muscle mass, but water too. I mean, there were no videos. Thank God for that. Thank God. And there was no Instagram, there was no Facebook yet, nothing like that. So there's no proof what happened there. But my wife will tell you that I did something very unorthodox in a baptism pool that was more like pushing a person back above the water. And I had to do it another time. So I knew the second time, hear it all, and it went wrong again. I mean, but when they came out of the water eventually, I tell you, they were jumping in the water. And I don't know if you've ever seen a video clip where a pastor is baptizing someone and he's being pulled down with him and he almost drowns and the deacons have to pull him out of the water. Well, that was pretty much me. Between those two guys jumping in the water, I was I felt like I was on a rough sea. But it was a rough sea of happiness. Why? Because God said, I have plans for you. Plans to prosper, plans for a future of hope. I have a declaration made for each and every one of you. Christianity is not religion, it is, and thank God for that, it is a relationship. A relationship with God Himself, who said, I will be found. The Lord is impressing on me for a moment just to be quiet now. And just for yourself, for a moment, just to become silent and hear Him speak to you. Declaration will continue to be handed out to you, to me, for the coming days, weeks, months, years. And may we just say, thank you, God. And with that, sing glory to Him. The beautiful song, A Mighty Fortress is our God. Shall we just in a moment, as the music starts to play, stand and sing that powerful song to Him alone.